Hey folks, this is George Leoniak back with new geometry here. And this is kind of the third in a video series now that's turned into being all about the Chestahedron and the Decatria and the work of Frank Chester. So I'm going to continue on with that again and look at how the Chestahedron relates to the Earth. You know, one of the things that really inspired me with Frank's work when I first saw it was how Frank connected the Chestahedron to the Earth. Let me show you in his book here. This is the A New Sacred Geometry. And in there, he has images with the Earth in a sphere. And, you know, he also had in there as well an example of how to draw a cube at the center of the Earth with a diagram like this. So, you know, I was talking to Frank about this all this past week and have spent just a huge amount of time working on this over the past week, making all sorts of discoveries on this. So, you know, stick with me and join me. Remember, geometry is all about geometry, Earth measure. So this is Frank's work with this form is one of the only forms that I've seen that actually give us an estimate of the core of the Earth, so the core at the center of the Earth, the inner core, compared to the diameter of the Earth. And as you know, in some of my other videos, I'm super excited about the Earth. I'll bust out the geohedron here, this gigantic form that I created based on the Earth grid. And you know, at some point, I'm going to put the core back into this structure here. And but let's continue on with Frank's work and take a look at what the Chestahedron tells us with the 2D drawings and the 3D drawings around that Earth to core relationship. So as usual, you know, before I jump in, I do have the slideshow, but I wanted to find a way, and I'll just jump to kind of the end almost at the beginning because they're linked. You know, for our discussions with Frank, it's like, people, you know, we've got to really draw this stuff. We got to create it. We got to work with it. And this image right here contains this outer circle here would be the Earth, and the inner one would be the core here. And this has been all kind of boiled down into the most user-friendly geometers straight edge and compass tools to create that relationship between the Earth and the core. So, you know, I've got a little bit of instruction here. It's not completely an instructional video, but I'm going to kind of show you how I got there. So let's share the screen and take a look at our first slide, which was just that image that I showed you. We're not going to spend too much time on it just yet. But it is an awesome method, very simple to do. And it contains, you know, a lot of things that I've really been excited about and inspired in a lot of my videos, if you've seen them, is really what is the relationship to this Chestahedron and the Decatria to the flower of life. You know, as I described in my previous videos, you know, the flower of life, you know, doesn't draw the icosahedron and the dodecahedron accurately. And Frank's work here with the Chestahedron, which is based on phi, there's two triangles in it, which are the kite edge and as well as the larger triangle that creates this. So this triangle, which would be here, flaring out the sides, and this base, they're in a relationship of phi. And that just so happens to be related to the icosahedron and the dodecahedron as well. So, you know, this design of the Chestahedron fits beautifully over the flower of life. And, you know, after I did the last video, that was a slide from that previous slideshow. You know, Frank sent me this image because he was like, well, you know, how are we going to integrate this with the flower of life? This is one of his that he created where he did put the Chestahedron in the halfway point at that central hexagon, determining the size of the Earth and where the core would be. And, you know, throughout the discoveries of the things I've been sharing, we've been working with this and trying to really get into that a little bit further, a little bit more refined with the precise drawing app that I'm using. So it really led us into the right direction to discover this based on Frank's artistic expression of these awesome forms that he's created. as sculptures. So, when Frank put this one back in here, this was one of my first slideshow back on the Chestahedron, the golden Chestahedron video. I decided to put in the Chestahedron into the flower of life just to see what would happen. Because in his book, he does have one that a picture that shows how the Chestahedron could be drawn in the flower of life. And then I have my method over here, which was in the seed of life, because this relationship between this blue triangle and this dotted black one here, or red, I'm not sure what that is. Those two right there are in phi relationship, meaning the edges of this is 1 and that edge of this would be 0.618. And that's how the golden version, as I call it, of the Chestahedron is created. Now, when we go back to this, the flower of life, as I've been saying, doesn't quite have that life component of the phi in it. I mean, it's a fantastic pattern. And yes, just like I did here, we can create phi-based circles within that pattern, which are still created to this template of creation that we're all so familiar with. But it standing alone on itself doesn't produce that phi relationship just in those series of circles as they expand out. So when we take these measurements, if I create this at the 1 inch right here, well, this measurement is not going to be 0.618. So that's why we had to kind of revisit how to construct the Chestahedron in the flower of life, because it's so close to being right on and accurate. It's just we need to take a little bit more modifications. Now, this isn't just due to the Chestahedron. The flower of life, as it has been created, has been creating all sorts of little bit of havoc in sacred geometry for geometers for quite a while, and it's been reproduced and reprinted in a gazillion books at this point of how to draw the icosahedron. Remember, this is from my not all 5 platonic solids are in Metatron's cube or in the fruit of life, some video like that. So if you want a fuller explanation of this, but it's something I've really been interested in. Because, in drawing these, I'd really like to have this flared out. And this is an icosahedron taken right from Wikipedia that draws it with this flared out section. And amazingly, this little flared out section, rather than it just being an equilateral triangle, that actually is the Chestahedron outline right there, a double Chestahedron right there. And we're going to get to the double Chestahedron in just a moment. But it has 2 of them. So the icosahedron is pretty much, from the top-down view, the same geometry as the Chestahedron from top view, which is just phenomenal. I mean, that's incredible that they are together like that. But that's based on those phi circles. So this icosahedron, as we've been seeing and has been documented in like those gazillion books I'm talking about on sacred geometry, is not accurate to this regular icosahedron. Essentially, this is an octahedron with another triangle inside of it. So that's what this shape pretty much is. Same thing with the dodecahedron. Dronvallo really popularized Metatron's cube with this back edge. And as I showed in that video, this back edge would be 0.48 inches if this is 1 inch. That's quite a big difference away from 1 inch to 0.618, right? So this kind of squished dodecahedron, if you were to take this as a template, like these sacred geometry blueprints, these templates, these flower of life patterns and all these, they're actually blueprints to kind of pull it off the page and create the form. So if I took this and started to cut it out and fold it up, these edges just wouldn't match up. You would have a kind of distorted version of what you're trying to create as a dodecahedron. So, if we're looking at the pentagon faces of the dodecahedron from above, we have to have 1 to 0.618, because that's what that form is as a platonic solid. This would be a 0.48 inches on the back edge, which means this would quite a bit taper in there. So, just further clarification on that. And in my studies in a previous video, all this can be easily modified and corrected in our consciousness around these forms with this kind of light gray double, I have a triple actually, phi relationship circles, all within the beautiful flower of life pattern that we're so familiar with. And at the same time, what it does is it creates all the 5 platonic solids, including the Chestahedron. Remember, that's the same outline as the icosahedron. This is the green Chestahedron down here. It's all the same. So those just fit together perfectly. And we get the dodecahedron, which has kind of been, like I've been saying in some of the other videos, a real mystery for geometers, how to create that accurately through sacred geometry techniques. Rhombic dodecahedron, I put in the fusion of the cube and octahedron, because that can also be a version of it rather than just a cube. Because everybody always thinks of Metatron's cube, but it can also easily just as well be an octahedron because they share the same hexagon, and it could be a rhombic dodecahedron. I have a whole video on that, on the dynamic steady state of the universe. So check that out if you're interested in that. So let's continue on with, one of my interests from a while back, as soon as I saw the Chestahedron, of course, I'm thinking star tetrahedron. Well, what happens if you put 2 of these together? And, so earlier in the process, I sent Frank a couple of images like this, and we didn't kind of revisit them till later on because they didn't mean much at the time. But, when I found the center of the double Chestahedron here, I call it the Chestahedron or Merkaba, the heart of light. The Merkaba stands for the body of light. Well, the Chestahedron is based on the heart, so the heart of light, and it brings it all back to the heart. And hopefully Frank and I will get on and do a video, because he's just been saying some just beautiful imagery and things of how this all relates to the Chestahedron, which I want you to all hear in his own words. So I'll save on some of those gems of wisdom that he can share in a little until we get on together. So when I put this together, and this was kind of in my last video, I was talking about this sphere of the Chestahedron in the sphere, and I was thinking that this horizontal line as it goes across was directly in the center, dividing the Chestahedron in half. And this was kind of a little bit of a surprise to both Frank and I, because when I did put these together, I saw that, well, it looks like that the hexagon above and below that would be in that each individual Chestahedron is actually not the halfway point. It's between the two, and there's a new center that creates that sphere around it, and it's in a hexagon within the middle that's a shared hexagon between the joined form. So that had us kind of, at least me, really go back to the drawing pad and the drawing app to really work on what's that going to mean for the flower of life? How's it going to fit into the seed of life and the things I've been talking about? Now, one thing about the perspective in a lot of my videos I talk about, and this is going to come into a lot of importance later on, is when we put the Chestahedron and we're looking at it from this view, right? It looks like it's just floating in the middle of the sphere. So that is this view. This is only one Chestahedron. This would be the Chestahedron Merkaba, heart of light, the heart Merkaba. And then here's the one, if it's, the vertices would be touching up above and the top, so those would be in contact with the sphere. And then if I turn that to the side, we've got this long sloping face, and that's the long sloping face of one of the star pentagons. So when I say star, I'm going to show you later on in this video how the Chestahedron is created out of the 5-pointed star. And so one of these kites, these long kites, is essentially from this top down, this whole length here, and also this blue side. So that then gives us the contact points for how the Chestahedron fits in the sphere. So that gives us this outer sphere, okay? So, like I said, early on, I was super excited about the Chestahedron, doing a lot of things. So this is probably one of my first, batch of sculpts that I ever done. I've quite advanced into the geohedron over here, but as you can see, the earth measure of the geometry has certainly been something I've been quite interested in. So I did this about 4 years ago, and I sent an image to Frank. I said, hey, look, I made this, this is, I was inspired by your work. Look at this awesome creation that I did. So I sent this recently, and certainly it's nowhere near as great as, Frank's awesome sculptures, but I was working something out. Now, this was done 4 years ago, and I sent an image to Frank, actually took the picture again because I turned it around the other day, and amazingly what I did on it back then, 4 years ago, this is how these kind of discoveries work. It really works on your consciousness in dream time and awake time, over a long haul. I had those two lines of the hexagons that's in the Chestahedron. So, these are going across and here's the center point. And at that time I said, well, hey, maybe the Earth's core is right about here. That was scribbled on this little dilapidated cut up Chestahedrons from 4 years ago, just kind of sandwiching them together, taping it all together. I still had it around. So all I'm saying with this as well is that whenever you create anything in sacred geometry, either a drawing or a sculpture, if you don't give it away, which is great to do as well, keep everything, because every little thing you do is part of this much larger story that is unfolding for you in your relationship to this material. Gazillion discoveries can be made as you go back and revisit those little intuitive inclinations that you have. I had no idea when I did this that I'd be, talking to Frank about this work, creating structures like the geohedron, and putting this all together in a way that I'd be presenting on this thoroughly at this point. So yeah, just when you're involved with sacred geometry, either in drawing or creating, keep those things. It's like a living notebook of a journal, basically, that you can go back and revisit awesome discoveries that might not mean much at the time, but will later on mean something in the big picture. All right, so this is, let's take a look at this slide here, because this one, it's got the most writing on it out of every slide in this. So, but it's super important for me to just go through this so you kind of understand what it is that I'm about to do here, because what we have to do is figure out how to get the core of the Earth inside the sphere created by the Chestahedrons, okay? So, when I first started doing some research on numbers, I checked on Wikipedia, and they said basically the core is roughly 1/5 the diameter of the Earth, the inner core. So, so that was okay, roughly 1/5. But I want to be a little more exact than 1/5. So, and I actually want to take into account, if we're looking down at this from top-down view, what is actually the Earth's diameter at the equator, right? Because the Earth is not a perfect sphere. A lot of geometry that we do, in fact, a lot of geometers will just say the Earth is 7,920 miles, because that number all adds up to 9 when you add up all the digits and compress the number. And that's a great one for geometers to kind of work with. But the Earth's actual diameter, kind of a rough estimate, would be 7,917.5. So even our great calculations of squaring the Earth, the circle, or the Earth-Moon proportion diagrams that I did a video on, even those have a high degree of inaccuracy, because we're not actually taking the actual estimate of the Earth. We're using a number that's more convenient. But I went with 7,926, which is actually on the Wikipedia site or some search I did. It says that's a diameter at the equator. The poles, it's a little shrunken. And then you have the median value somewhere in between. And then I found out the inner Earth core diameter, which was 1,516. So I was just like, how many circles would it take me to fill up this Earth, right? So if I divide these two numbers, well, that's going to tell me how. It didn't come up to 5. That would have been nice. That would have been easy to do. It came up to 5.228232 in a string of digits. And I'm like, okay, well, how do I account for this 0.2282? Like, that's not just an easy number when you're just dealing with the straight edge and compass and not working with measurements to just type it in and get that dimension. Well, how do you figure that out? Well, the amazing thing is the Chestahedron gets you there. It gets you very close to that. It gets you to 99.85% accuracy. Now that's phenomenal. And you need the Chestahedron in this 2D perspective. Now, this isn't going to be the Chestahedron as you see these Chestahedron, the blue and the red one here. Those aren't the Chestahedrons that are going to be in the Earth. This Chestahedron that we're talking about, I'm going to call it the outer Chestahedron because we're going to refer to it in the future. That outer Chestahedrons, the double, the Star Chestahedron, that is giving you the template to create the outer sphere of the Earth. Now, great, well, that gives us an outer sphere, but you see, if I divide the circle into 5, and I use the star cut diagram by Malcolm Stewart, oh, that's supposed to be a T, Malcolm Stewart, he's got a book called the Star Cut Diagram, Patterns of Eternity. And in there, he's got a great method to divide the line into like 5, 10, 12, a variety of different divisions. So I put that on there. I divide the line into divide the line into 5 circles. And, what I discovered is that the value that I had to use to get close to what this radius is, this diameter, is it just so happened I was like, well, 2.36 is very close. I mean, 5.228 is very close to the square root of 5 plus 3. Now, the square root of 5 is part of the phi ratio. Square root of 5 plus 1 divided in half will give you 1.618. Well, the square root of 5 plus 3 divided in half will give you a radius of 2.618, which is the square root of 5. So, this is the best I could do because I didn't know how to create a better circle using sacred geometry to create that diameter. So what I did was I created this diameter circle at 5.236. And that's the diameter of the Earth estimate that I gave you up here with the Earth's equator. And that's at 5.228. And I hope I'm not losing it here. Just stick with me because that's what gives us the value that when we divide those two numbers, that gives us 99.85% accuracy between this circle and that outer circle. But still, how do I know that this circle in here, like what is this dimension of this circle? All I've done was divide this into fifths. Well, that's where the Chestahedron comes into play because back in Frank's work, what he did was he created a hexagon off of the Chestahedron. And it just so happens, and this is totally amazing, that when you draw in that hexagon, the classic stars, the hexagram stars that go down, and then you put in this blue circle at the center of the stars, right? You got that circle in the middle. This one right here is the same as that. That just happens to be 1 inch. So that provides the scale of this yellowish orange circle here, okay? The Chestahedron gave you the scale because now if I add up each of these blue circles, well, that's 5 inches. So that means the remainder of that is the remainder of the root 5 plus 3, this 5.236. So it's not exactly the Earth. Remember, this is 99.85% accurate, and we're dealing with the Earth's diameter at the equator. But you know what? That was good enough for me to continue on. And so that means that the 1 inch circle is the blue one there, the orange yellow one. Well, when I divide the number of the 5.228, or actually divide the number of sorry, this should be 5.2. This should be the 5.236 number divided by 5. So I should divide that by 5. That will give me 1.047. So that gives me the size of this circle in relationship to this circle. And just another little sacred geometric magic happening. When you put these two circles together and you make like a fruit of life, like if I just put a blue one here and a blue one there and a blue one there and a yellow there, you'll have 6 around 1 of 2 different size circles that completely touch each other. So this is tangent to one another. It's like they're meant to be together. They fit together perfectly. So, okay, that was like a lot of information in that slide, but all I'm saying here is that the Chestahedron was essential to get the scale of break the 5 inch measurement, which is what's all going to happen with this hexagram star, is you needed the 5 in there to get that root 5 plus 3 diameter to get that dimension of the core. So that's the Earth, that's the core, and that's how I went about doing that. So we're at 99.85% accurate, but that only solves the problem of, remember I mentioned we got this outer Chestahedron. Now this blue circle is the Earth. And we also have an inner Chestahedron, because remember, we want to put the Chestahedron back in the Earth. When we're looking at it this way, and like I'm looking here, these points don't look like they're touching. So the outer Chestahedron, all that does is set you up to create the relationship of the core to the Earth, the outer Earth. So it gives you the outer Earth and the core. Then what we need to do is find the inner Chestahedron and put the core and the Earth in that inner Chestahedron. So I've removed the blue circle here. This blue Chestahedron, the little one in here, is this blue Chestahedron right here. The larger outer Chestahedron was just there to create the Earth. So that's why we've got this Chestahedrons work in two parts of this discovery. Okay, so how do we get to that inner Chestahedron? Well, very easily, very accurate way of doing it is to just draw the Chestahedron already. This is the inner Chestahedron, because remember, this blue circle, this big one out here, is the Earth, and that was created by those outer Chestahedrons. Now I've taken those out and I've just placed in the inner Chestahedrons, the double star Chestahedron, the red and the blue one. And what that will do, if you draw them in the seed of life, just like this, then that's going to hook you up to put the Chestahedron back into that larger sphere, meaning that from this edge right here to that blue edge, when we rotate this right, it looks sunken down in there. Here's what it looks like. Once I turn the Chestahedron on its side, well, magically, now we could see that that is actually contacting the sphere that the Chestahedrons are contained in. So that's actually a point on the surface of the Earth, and this is exactly what Frank did. And we can do that off of the seed of life. And this is actually right here, these circles inside this are kind of like the seed of life in cross section. I basically just, you try and visualize this. I did some other images on it. I decided not to include them because I know a lot of people have been saying, I get overwhelmed with the length of these videos. I tried to do this one shorter, and I'm imagining I'm not going to succeed in that because there's just so much information in here. I imagine I'm almost about a half hour in. But so anyway, we rotate the Chestahedron, and we have the seed of life in a cross-section view here. So these are all things that you can kind of visualize, but this is how we get the Chestahedron to connect to the outer sphere of the Earth. Now, you can't just do that with a regular cube, and I'm going to show you that in a moment. The next thing, Frank kind of presented a bunch of little challenges for me over the week. Was then he's like, okay, well, now we've got the Chestahedron in that sphere, which is this blue one, and we've got the outer Chestahedron here. There it is. Well, how do you create the cube that's at the center of that? This is going back to Frank's work. He said there was a cube within that. Amazingly, that little cube, the black cube that's down here, fits in there in the hexagram star off of the central hexagon that was created from the double star Chestahedron. So that right there is the diameter. There's actually two little mini hexagons. There's a hexagon that's so close to this red one that fits right in there along this orange line. And that creates the inner hexagon. And you could pretty much just draw it right off of the star that's in here with the creating the cube that would be in the center of the Earth. And then we could put the root 3 sphere, because there's a sphere around that cube, and that sphere, which is just a little bit bigger than that hexagon that's created, that then gives you the cube in the center of the Earth. And here it is from the side view. And it's based off of the Chestahedron once again. So the Chestahedron is working all these elements. It's working the center, it's giving you the core, it's giving you with the big Chestahedrons, it's giving you the outside, and then we shrunk the Chestahedron down into the seed of life, and then it's giving you the Earth size sphere. So that's just phenomenal. There's no other form that you are going to be working with that at least exists right now that I've seen that does this to give you the core of the Earth, and also provides it in a very simple method for you to draw with a super high amount of accuracy above 99.5 when it all adds up with all the little things that come with this slight modifications. I mean, we're dealing with the Earth. So, we're using sacred geometry as creatively as we can to figure this out. And even our dimensions of the Earth and the Moon, I mean, they're not just estimates as well. So anyway, here's an important point to all this is the Chestahedron or the tetrahedron basically. It's like, how can you tell the difference from above? Because remember, these two triangles from the side. This is what they look like above. These are the same size tetrahedron compared to the same base of the chestahedron over here. So this length is the same as this length. And when you're looking at them from directly above, there is no way for you to be able to tell, because they're directly on top of one another, whether you're looking at a chestahedron or a tetrahedron from above. But the one thing that is super important about this is when you draw that chestahedron in the seed of life, and it connects to the chestahedron on the outside, which gave you this big blue sphere out here, which is the Earth, only one of those is going to touch the outer surface of the Earth. Remember, this is an optical illusion. This right here is the star tetrahedron. That black circle is the same as this black circle right here. So if you rotate that to a hexagon view from this orientation, all of a sudden it will look like this star is sunken in a little bit. It's even more dramatic with the chestahedron, but for the chestahedron, we know it's in contact with the surface of the Earth. With the star tetrahedron, we know that it's in contact with this black sphere. So that's really interesting, is that you need the chestahedron from that seed of life view to connect to the outer surface in the way that I'm presenting it, at least. Now, we know that we can create, as I'm going to show here in just a moment, that you could scale the star tetrahedron to touch the surface of the Earth, no problem. Why don't we just make this the size of the Earth? Well, then how do we find out the size of the inner core, if that matters? I mean, if you're into Earth measure, if you're into geometry, if you're into the purpose and the intention of sacred geometry as it connects to the Earth and expanding consciousness and understanding more about what it can teach us about these things, well, then how do we get that Earth core in the star tetrahedron? That would be my question. Because the chestahedron does it fantastically with that great degree of accuracy. So here are two patterns in the seed of life, and the seed of life is just light gray circles underneath this. And you have to look at both these patterns for a little while and see what should do each of these patterns communicate. I mean, this one looks a little more busy, and this one looks very straight lined edges. I mean, because this is the isotropic vector matrix. It's the bigger one that Seem Harriman and other scientists are researching about, kind of the static state of the universe as it just hexagon view built out, Buckminster Fuller-like, little buckyballs, building. It will continue on and on and on forever. So where's the life element within all that component? Because, this is like a perfect structure for just building hexagons and tetrahedrons and octahedrons, but you can't get icosahedron or the dodecahedron within this. So water and ether, where are they in the process of this if we bring in those elements? We got air, fire, and earth. What about the water? And what about the ether? Well, remember, over here in this seed of life version, we also have the template for the icosahedron, because remember, the chestahedron is just a 2D image of this. If I put a hexagon around this chestahedron that's on the outside with that flared outside, you've pretty much created an icosahedron. That's what it looks like from that view. So that creates water life, right? We got water in there. We've got ether, space, the unseen forces. That's all contained within this pattern. And I'm not setting this up to choose one over the other. They're both the same form. They're both overlapping each other, just like I showed with the decatria, how it perfectly fits over top of a cube octahedron. And then it just so happens that the chestahedron fits perfectly over top of an icosahedron. This is just what the geometry is showing us. And this one here creates the sphere that will go around the seed of life and will also go around the inner chestahedron that's created. And here is the sphere that would be around the isotropic vector, the isotropic vector matrix sphere is the black one. And now here's our cube, or here's our sphere that would be around the Earth based on the chestahedron. So, there's a difference there between these. They're both totally valid. They're both in the geometry. It's just that we can blend the two together, and both can communicate two different things and expand and involve our consciousness, just as this form has been doing now for the past 20 or 30 years as it's become more and more popular. Well, maybe this is another way to explore the same geometry. What will this unlock for you when you start to draw this or start to test out and observe what I've been showing you here in this? It will affect you, believe me. I've some dream this week, I went into the heart of the Chestahedron, into the vortex of the heart, you know, with Frank. So these are powerful images. They're powerful things that expand our consciousness and teach us a lot. So I would recommend checking out more on Frank's and what he describes about the heart. And like I said, I hope to get him on here so we can do that together and kind of wrap this up into a more complete package with his words involved. So here is just, now, like I said, what we can do is rather than having, you know, like I'm presenting back here, well, here's the tetrahedron down here, it's not connected to this. Well, that's not true. It's not like that at all. You know, that's just demonstrating this difference of how these can be the same star from viewed from above. And we can't really tell which is which without perspective, just in 2D drawings. But there doesn't prevent us, anything in sacred geometry, from just expanding the size of that star tetrahedron cube, right? So in this cube, there's a star tetrahedron because every cube has that star tetrahedron that would be in there. So all I did with this image is I created the cube so that it will share the same vertex as the apex of the Chestahedron. So this is √3. We're scaling it to √3 now because the cube has √3 within it. I've created that as the same √3 measurement as the Chestahedron through the center. So they're sharing space together. And amazingly, now when we look at this, we could see where the cube is in relationship to the sphere of the Earth. This vertice is on the surface of the Earth, and this one, and that one up above, and this one over here. These are all key, probably sacred site locations corresponding to this. And we also have the Chestahedron, which is also connected to those points. So we can see how the curvature of the Earth, where those tetrahedrons are going to show up in contact with the Earth. So here's the cube. Those are the points. Remember, this now is sharing that sphere with the Earth. So the Chestahedron created the Earth sphere, and we've inflated the cube to touch those points. And then we also have this smaller Chestahedron, which amazingly doesn't look like it'd be touching that sphere, but it is, because here it is, right? From this view, it shows that those equilateral triangles are in contact with it just as much as these larger ones are. And I didn't realize this, but with a high degree of accuracy, it gets you super duper close to creating that same edge right there. If you just draw a line straight across and connect it to the bottom of this circle. Now, this circle is important because that's the one that creates the Chestahedron. So when I draw this blue line, I didn't put them in here. Remember how the Chestahedron is flared out? It looks like an icosahedron. So when you connect that down and bring this up, that's the spot. And if I draw this straight across here, right touching that line, well, then that's all you need to do to create the cube that's in the Chestahedron. So the drawing, the root drawing that I'm going to show you, or I have been showing you and talking about, also contains the cube that touches the vertices of the surface of the Earth, And that's just incredible that the Chestahedron is able to do that. Now I'm just dropping this in there. It doesn't all need to be perfect, All three of these lines correspond to cube, Chestahedron, and that perfect, it's not even perfect, the one that's 99.85% accurate. If you're drawing with this an ink pen and you drew this line, you'll never know the difference. And that's really what this is about, is just to get as accurate as possible, just like with our connection to the Earth and the moon drawings, which have 99. We have a difficult time even squaring the circle to 100% accuracy when we don't use a modified version of pi. We use standard pi, where it's impossible to create something with perfect accuracy. And I have no problem with all the minute little microscopic little differences within some of these drawings here that bring it right back to being able to allow you to draw the core of the Earth at the 99 0.85% accuracy. And this method here will give you, with the large chestahedron, the surface of the Earth and the core all the way around. There's no other drawing technique or method that's going to be able to do it like this that easy. I didn't draw the smaller chestahedron in. I did this a couple weeks ago or last week. And, you know, we could easily just draw in the smaller chestahedron off the seed of life. And then all you have to do to create the core of the Earth is, once you get that diameter circle, right? And I'll show you how to do this in probably a drawing video at some point. You do this diameter circle on a separate sheet of paper, and you draw a square off the base of that. And you have to know how to do that. And then you draw that star cut diagram, draw the lines, and that delineates this circle into fifths. You take that diameter circle and then you place it back in here, and it will be a little bit beyond the hexagon that's the middle. And that's the way it's supposed to be, because that's the √3 sphere that you want that will fit around that cube, you know, right in the center of this. So there's a new drawing technique and method for how to draw the Earth and the core as it all pertains to the chestahedron. Now, when we take the seed of life, a few more slides here, I'm almost getting to the end. When we take the seed of life, remember I was using big circles. If we break those all into smaller circles, basically dividing each of the circles in half, what we'll get is 37 spheres of the flower of life pattern. Now, the flower of life pattern is usually these 19 circles that are just in the center, but to actually expand out so that it touches where I was calling the seed of life drawing, you would actually use 37 circles. Now, that's pretty cool because you know, this is a flower of life version that you know, you don't see too often with the 37 circles. Normally we jump right to the fruit of life, which would be the next series of concentric circles around this. So this is kind of in between, but you know, you got one in the center and 36 circles around. That's a, you know, mathematically a kind of nice thing, because that adds up to 36. You got 9 plus the 1, just like the fruit of life is seed of life is got the 18, which is 9 plus 1. So we've got the on the outside edge here, that's the big circle that creates the Earth once again. And then we've got the chestahedron that would be in the Earth, and we got the core. So another way we can draw this, just with these 37 1-inch circles that create the 37 circle flower of life. Yeah, it should be 37 circle rather than sphere. Okay, and this is the last and kind of like icing on the cake, the last kicker in the whole thing. This just blew me away. I found it yesterday or 2 days ago. You know, all of a sudden I looked at one of these angles and I said, hey, how about if I just construct a 7-pointed star? Now, a 7-pointed star, the chestahedron, the double chestahedron, the chestahedron Merkaba, the heart of light, right? The evolution in consciousness Merkaba, you know, that's what I think this is going to turn out to be here, is it actually creates the 7-pointed star in there. And how did I get there? That's just incredible. Now, remember, the 7-pointed star and even the heptagon, there's a mathematical proof that says you're not even able to create that with the straight edge and compass. And I heard that in one of Frank's videos. He got challenged by a mathematics person because Frank came up in his book. He's got an awesome method how to create a heptagon, and it's ever so slightly off. I mean, it's really, really close. And he did it all with straight edge and compass. And you know, the fellow pointed out that the mathematical proof says you can't do it. So I started to try and figure that out. That was like part of the puzzle of like, can it actually show up, and where would it show up? I tried separately on its own, just drawing a heptagon and trying to figure out all the angles. Really, no luck. I mean, it was super challenging, trying every little technique I could find. Put it aside. 2 days later, I just happened to look at the chestahedron. I said, hey, I wonder what this angle is. If I draw from here to here, create a heptagon around this line with the bottom chestahedron, the blue one, if you continue that straight all the way through, the angle that it creates for the heptagon is 128.7. And that's 128.571, which is so close to the perfect heptagon that all of a sudden I found the method to just create the other points around here and put the 7-pointed star with 99.7% accuracy. These are the internal angles, 128.7, 128.5 for this one, 128.3 for this one. And it's so perfect to actually come back to the 7 with the 7-sided form in the unionized version. And this star is just amazing, you know, because the 5-pointed star, and this is something that what's his name, Alex Gray. I happened to watch a sacred geometry video with him and his wife a little while ago. He does the fantastic art of all the chakras and the internal organs of the system. Alex Gray, Cosm, I believe, is his site and place, retreat center that he has with all his sacred geometry and art. In one of the videos, he just happened to say, and it really stood out to me, you know, 5 is the human form, you know, 5, and that the evolution in the consciousness, the evolution is to the 7, to the 7-pointed star, because you got the 2 legs, you got the 2 arms, you got the head, and what do you think these are? Well, that's the transformation into that angelic realm, the angelic consciousness, whatever you'd like to call it, just a higher frequency of vibration, basically, with the 7-pointed star. And the 7-sided form, this Merkaba version of it, which, you know, is equally now, for me, relating to the 7-pointed, to the star tetrahedron Merkaba, it's kind of like blossomed, it's kind of opened up in a way that create this new form that creates the 7-pointed star within the union of the 2. So what a just awesome conclusion to the evolution of the consciousness created within this form here. And it was great that my partner and I, we actually colored this in together. I discovered that day, and she came over later, which was here later in the afternoon. And then we just started working on this, creating this colorful, filling it in together, both of us bringing our hearts and minds together to work creatively, to come up with the color scheme, filling in the template and bringing it all into the life with all the 5-based relationships and the 7-pointed star together. So yeah, and this is, you know, I just want to show you, this is the template, this is the net for the Chestahedron, and I'm just about done here. You know, just like it's created out of this template of just what an amazing thing. It's just a 5-pointed star, and it has the tetrahedral base because it's got 7. Well, you've got 5 here. In one of Frank's videos, I'll share this little piece, and please watch his because he has it really set up way better than I do. He walks you through this process. And remember, this is something I did, you know, right after I watched Frank's video. I was like, oh, Frank found 7. Well, maybe I could find a 9-sided form. Well, I sort of did. I called this the lovahedron back then. I folded up the pentagon face. This was 3 years ago or 4. You know, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, here's 9 at the bottom. These happen to have a little bend to them, I discovered. But I was like, hey, that's pretty cool. I put 2 together and built all sorts of cool forms from that. And I saw Frank actually do this in a video the other day that I was watching of his. And we talked on the phone. I was like, did you ever do that? He was like, oh, yeah, I did that, of course. So it's just cool to think when you're thinking all along the same lines. But I'm just kind of surprised when I do this. Like, why did no one really think of this before? You know, like, you know, when all you have to do is fold up the star into the 3 points, and that actually will maintain the flat surface all the way along there. It doesn't distort the edge like the 4-pointed one would, right? So you have that, and I'm just going to tape that edge shut there. And so, you know, there's 1/2 of it, right? And it's like the tetrahedron here is like this, right? And then all of a sudden it starts to open up, right? And it's just incredible that it opens up to a point where this edge will fit right in there, right? And it just divides the point in that opening to create this the docking station, or the life energy coming into that, the warmth, I think Frank calls it, but bringing the warmth into the opened up Chestahedron here, or into the opened up tetrahedron, as it creates the Chestahedron in the 7-sided form. I mean, it's that simple, you know. It's like these components of just these flat net images of the 5-pointed star and the triangle folded up into the tetrahedron joined together create that. And then now we're taking two of those and bringing them together to create the heart of lights, heart Merkaba, whatever the settled name is on that, the Star Chestahedron, bringing them together, discovering the center of the earth and the core, bringing it straight into our heart and connecting it to the earth core heart, the inner core of the earth, and containing the seven-sided form, the seven-pointed polygon in there, and just the evolution of consciousness that is all contained within how revolutionary this is and how it basically overlays the flower of life and the seed of life, and how it brings the icosahedron and the decahedron into it accurately. That's a real kind of culmination of a lot of threads all kind of coming together, and I had no idea that it was gonna come together. And really, it kind of all started with this little kind of rinky-dink thing that I put together here, that I've really kind of been working on all these other little pieces in the back of my mind to finally come back around to it and say, well, this little thing I did back here actually was something more meaningful than I ever knew when I first did it. So I really appreciate you all watching this video. I'm super thankful that you've come back to watch another one. And like I said, we'll see if we could get Frank on here. That would be totally exciting. And I'm so thankful that you're all into this, and looking forward to the next video. And yeah, much love and peace. Until next time, have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you then.